Tana is a very weird unit to talk about. She's a Pegasus Knight in Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones, and as a GBA flyer, there's a very high floor for where you're going to end up in terms of viability. She joins in Chapter 9 of a 20-chapter game, although it would be unfair to say that it's halfway through the game, because the first 8 chapters of Sacred Stones are basically a glorified tutorial. She has serviceable bases, quite good growths, and a very good class line, and yet I find myself consistently benching her. I don't think she's bad, but I think the issues Tana runs into are emblematic of Sacred Stone's unit design. In Sacred Stones, most units are growth units. Heck, even Seth, the game's Jagan, has really good growths. The first 8 chapters of Sacred Stones serve as a fairly decent tutorial to the game's mechanics, although they skip over a couple of things such as weapon weight. As a result of their tutorial-like nature, the early chapters end up being very easy, with lots of weak enemies. Even if you're playing at a breakneck pace and completing every single objective with Seth, there's plenty of time to feed kills to your growth projects of choice. Chapter 4 in particular features a lot of weak monsters who give a relatively high amount of experience for the ease with which they can be killed. One of the more popular growth units for all of this experience is Vanessa. After all, she's your first flyer, and she has pretty decent growths. I personally don't think it's unreasonable for her to reach level 10 by the time that you get Tana in Chapter 9. On average, a level 10 Vanessa will have slightly better stats than Tana does at base, which honestly isn't that impressive for the amount of experience you sink into her. The first is that I don't necessarily think level 10 is a realistic place for Vanessa to be. If you've been focusing on her a lot as a training project, then by the time Tana rolls around, she could realistically be around level 15 or so. The second is that in Chapter 8 you get access to your first Elysian Whip, and assuming you've invested at least enough in Vanessa for her to hit level 10, it's relatively uncontested. You could wait until Tana gets 6 levels and give it to her, but Vanessa can make use of it sooner. Chapter 9 of Eirika Route features some pretty tricky side objectives, one of which benefits significantly from a competent combat unit who can fight over the ocean. Your only candidates for this are base level Tana, Ross if you chose to make him go pirate, or Vanessa, who can really benefit from a promotion. If you choose to make her a Wyvern Knight, she gets 2 more strength, 1 more defense, and functionally 6 more speed due to the Constitution buff. In contrast, if you choose to go Falco Knight, she gets sword access for weapon triangle over the pirates. Personally, I'm partial to Wyvern Knight, but whichever path you choose to go, she's going to get a benefit in the short term for doing so. And I think this is well worth using your first Elysian Whip. This does mean that Tana will have to wait for your second Elysian Whip, but she's only level 4 at join time, so by the time she gets the 6 levels necessary to promote, you're probably going to have the second Elysian Whip already, right? Well, yes, but if you've played the Sacred Stones, then you know it's a little bit more complicated than that. Because if Tana doesn't get the first Elysian Whip, then she's stuck in an unpromoted class for a pretty awkward amount of time, as the second whip doesn't show up until near the end of Chapter 13, Himmel Canyon. This shouldn't be a huge deal, however. It gives her like 4 chapters to train, and then when the second whip comes around, she can promote. Except for the second whip comes on her competition. The second whip of Eirika Route shows up in the inventory of Cormag, a level 11 Wyvern Knight with incredibly cracked stats. At base, he has 32 HP, 15 strength, 10 skill, 11 speed, 5 luck, 13 defense, and 3 resistance, as well as a massive 11 constitution, near guaranteeing he doesn't get weighed down by heavy lances. In contrast, a level 15 Tana has on average 27 HP, 11 strength, 13 skill, 20 speed, 14 luck, 8 defense, and 9 resistance. While it may seem like her speed lead is massive, she only has 5 constitution, so her effective speed is going to be much lower if she wields lances, which is the only weapon she can currently wield. Additionally, many of the speed thresholds in Sacred Stones are low enough that Cormag can still double a vast majority of enemies. He's not going to double everything at base, but with the 3 speed he gains from promotion, combined with a 45% speed growth, he'll double more than enough. He really overshadows Tana when it comes to competition for that second whip. But I was giving Tana a lot of credit assuming that she hit level 15. Realistically, unless you're heavily focusing on training her, she's probably going to be closer to 10. and the competition there is even steeper. What's worse is these are the only 2 Elysian whips in the game. If you want Tana to promote, she either has to use the Master Seal from Chapter 15, or purchase an Elysian whip in one of the secret shops in either Chapter 14 or Chapter 19. Okay, but this is Eirika Route we're talking about. Do things look better for Tana on Ephraim Route? Well, in some ways it does, but in other ways it doesn't. Chapter 9 no longer has a side objective that is severely helped by flyers, so there's not as pressing a need to promote Vanessa early. However, in this route, Tana is going to be even slower to hit level 10. In Chapter 9, she starts out disarmed in a jail cell, and for about 2/3 of the map, she's not going to be able to do anything. By the time you get her free and a weapon, the map is probably almost over. She can train a little bit on reinforcements, but she's not going to be helping you much. This is all self-improvement. But hey, on the bright side, the second Elysian Whip shows up earlier, so if you do want to early promote Vanessa, you have an opportunity to also early promote Tana. Unfortunately for Tana, the second whip isn't the only thing arriving early, as Cormag also shows up in Chapter 10. He's slightly less jacked than in Eirika mode, but he's still a level 9 wyvern with very respectable stats. Most notably, he has double Tana's starting strength, with 14 to her 7, and in comparison, she only has 3 more speed than him. But that's before factoring in the fact that his 11 constitution means he can actually wield heavy lances, whereas she cannot. As if to add insult to injury, Tana has to spend the first couple of turns of Chapter 10 avoiding combat in order to recruit Cormag. Theoretically, you could also have Dusel recruit Cormag, but it is much easier to have Tana do it, and you kind of want to recruit Cormag as quickly as possible so that you don't have to deal with his killer lance as an enemy. It's hard enough for Tana that she starts out underleveled. The fact that she's sidelined for significant portions of the first 2 maps she's available is just really tragic. It makes training her on Ephraim Route arguably even harder than on Eirika Route. The one upside is there aren't too many objectives for an early promoted Vanessa in Ephraim 9 or 10, but Ephraim 11 definitely benefits from multiple competent combat flyers, and a promoted Vanessa could fill one of those slots. Of course, promoted Cormag also really helps there, which is yet another argument for sidelining Tana to recruit Cormag early. But sidelining her in Chapter 10 makes it all that much harder for her to be up to snuff for ghost shit. Chapter 10 is a survive map, so even if you go out of your way to set up kills for Tana, you only have so many turns to train her before you get forced into Chapter 11. Well, okay. There is one way you can train her before Chapter 11 on Ephraim Route. You see, anyone who's played the Sacred Stones will be well aware of a location called the Tower of Volney, where you can go and fight infinite waves of incredibly weak zombies. Functionally, this is an infinite source of experience, and gold because sometimes the zombies will drop items. Now, most Fire Emblem games have some way of grinding out infinite experience. In FE4, you can manipulate Commander AI to get tons of reinforcements, you can arena abuse in the other GBA games. Any stationary boss on a healing tile is ripe for abuse to get you overleveled. When evaluating units, many people, myself included, will discount those methods of infinite grinding. While I can't speak for the rest of the Fire Emblem community, my logic behind doing so is that if all of your units reach an arbitrarily high level, then they can one-round every enemy, at which point there isn't really a point in comparing units to each other. Just use your favorites, overlevel them, and kill everything without any sort of effort. And I genuinely mean do it. If that's the sort of experience you want from Fire Emblem, then I encourage it. Have fun training up your little Strunklies and then watching them become god killers. Donal for S++ tier. But back on the topic of Tana, the reason that I bring up the tower is if you want her to be able to promote by Chapter 11, then the easiest way to do that is to send her into the Tower of Volney. Give her 6 quick levels on the pushover zombies of floor 1, and then you can promote both her and Cormag, leave Vanessa unpromoted, and have 2 competent combat flyers for ghost shit. It's a boring answer, but it's the correct one if you want to use Tana to her fullest potential. Now, I know some might scoff at the idea of use the tower as the solution, and insist that if you send people into the tower, you're playing the game wrong. But I would counter that actually, by avoiding using any of the grinding resources, we're playing the game wrong. In contrast to things like the FE4 AI abuse, boss abuse, or arena abuse, the grinding in Sacred Stones is clearly dev intended. The ways in which you can grind are tutorialized for you, and many of the units who join in the mid-game are begging for a trip or two through the tower. Are you a fan of Swordmasters but can't stand Joshua's hat? Well, never fear, Marissa shows up 5 chapters later than him with worse bases and worse weapon ranks. Would you rather use the female Cavalier sprite than the male one? Never fear, Amelia just needs 10 levels of grinding to be able to promote into female Cavalier. Would you prefer your staffer on a horse instead of footlocked? Well, both Natasha and La Rochelle can fulfill that, but they're also underleveled in comparison to their competition. Would you like a dark mage with an actual luck stat? Well, Ewan is on the job, but his weapon ranks and level are going to suck unless you allow him to grind. And while she isn't as laughably bad at base as the other units, Tana is an example of this design philosophy. She is a much lower level than you would expect for her join time, and in comparison to Cormag, who joins fairly close to her. She wants to go into the tower, and if you ignore her wishes, you're playing the game wrong. Or are you? Is it possible to play a single-player game wrong? I mean, sure, you're definitely pushing back against dev intentions, but there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes devs have stupid intentions. Kaga intended archers to be frontline units, but I make them into bench fodder. I don't find grinding to be fun, and I especially don't find the Tower Volney to be fun. And at the end of the day, isn't that what Fire Emblem is about? Fun? Well, except for FE12, but that's a special exception. I don't think it's possible to play Fire Emblem wrong. As long as you are having fun, then you should play Fire Emblem however you want to. If that involves using Tana, then go for it. If that involves bringing Tana to the tower, then absolutely go for it as well. And if that involves using Tana while she's underleveled and hoping to eke out some experience on the maps, go for that as well. I do think that in non-tower play, Tana is screwed over by circumstance, but a unit being screwed over by circumstance has never stopped them from being viable. I mean, I've seen people kill the final boss with Nino. I've seen 0% growth Sorcerer Mozu kill Takumi. I've turned Tobin and Gray into primary combat carries as Cavaliers. Sometimes pushing back against dev intentions can give you the best stories. Thanks for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, then please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons so you can see what else I have in store. Or if you can afford it, my Patreon is linked below. My patrons are actually the people who decided that I would be making a video on Tana, and I'm currently running a poll for my next unit analysis. So if you'd like your chance to influence the channel, this is as good a time as any to subscribe. But please only do so if you can comfortably afford it. I don't want anyone going broke over Fire Emblem. As for the people who've already subscribed, thank you to Gameboo, Firant, Cordelia Frey, Smaz Ruby, Saxon, Seraphew58, Reflect, Robin Cars That Drive, Marlon McLean, Storm, Jamie Collins, Mary Karen, Thick Molder, Danielle Kalaskis, Jagan is an Est, Julia Kyoto, Arvis, Belle Wenska, Tailored Muffin, George Grenville the 7th PM, SUP, Caius Cole, Gabe the Green, Control Alt Aegis, Joanna the Wrench Witch, Juniper Jungby, Ginger, and Autumn Kelsey. I really appreciate your support. It lets me do what I'm doing. You know, the coolest possible job, talking about Fire Emblem. Seriously though, this gig is a dream come true, and I have y'all to thank for it. Anyway, to both my patrons and my viewers, I hope y'all have a wonderful day. Stay safe, gamers.